Hey everybody, it's Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com. For all things Vespa, check us out on the web, ScooterWest.com. We are the #1 source for parts and accessories for both modern and vintage Vespa scooters in North America. We have it all in stock, all the parts needed to do a job such as replacing this muffler, pulling this muffler, or changing a rear tire. We got you covered, ScooterWest.com. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to show today how to remove the muffler on your 125 or 150cc Vespa or Piaggio scooter. They're a little trickier than you think, and that's probably why you stumbled across this video. If you search for it, you realize they're not the easiest thing to remove, and then when you put it on, you end up with an exhaust leak and you wonder why. I'll show you some tips on how to successfully remove and reinstall the muffler. Main reason you need to do that is you need to change the tire on your scooter, whether it's like this LX 150, Vespa ET4, a Piaggio Fly 150, Typhoon 150, Primavera Sprint, they're also very similar. So let's jump right into it. I'm going to show you the tools as I go along with the video. Very simple tools, but there's one specialty tool that makes the job just that much easier. So if you're in a shop environment, I suggest you look in the description of this video for that part number for that specialty tool from SnapOn. Along with, I'll have some extra part numbers for the replacement muffler, the tire sizes used typically on the scooters that you'd remove this muffler. So the more difficult part to removing the exhaust is gaining access to the pair of copper coated exhaust flange nuts right here. So you can see they're right here. It's obviously nice and easy since I have a motor here, but I just wanted to show you what we use in the shop. I use a swivel head, medium length, 10mm socket. This is a very specific socket sold by SnapOn. We don't have this on our website. I'll put the SnapOn part number if you really want it in the description. But the idea is you have the swing arm right here, and there's not much clearance to get to these two nuts. Alternatively, another way to do this, if you don't have that socket, is you could use a swivel or a swivel socket. So you see how that's a 10mm socket and it's loose on the tip of this extension. That's pretty critical because then you're able to get up in there, and usually these are pretty tight. And I'd suggest just breaking both of them free. And with the swing arm in the way, it's a little more difficult. So get those both out of the way, and then you could spin them off. And sometimes I'll reach up in here and just spin them off by hand, obviously not with a hot exhaust. And in the description of the video, I'll have the part numbers for these replacement copper coated 7mm nuts. They're pretty specific to the Vespas and Piaggio scooters. Used kind of across the board on the 125 and 150cc engines. So now that you have this flange pulled away, we'll be able to remove the two fasteners that hold the whole muffler to the engine. So you need a 6mm Allen key. You could put it on the end of a 3/8 drive socket if you have that style. Just go ahead and break both of these loose. Typically, I'll remove the lower one all the way out, and just keep in mind they're going to be two different lengths. And at this point, I'll support the muffler with one hand. See how the muffler is very loose because those holes are rather large. So I'm supporting the muffler, and I pulled the fastener out, and here's the trick to getting the muffler out. So you kind of drop it towards the front, drop it towards the back. See how I'm not trying to pull it this way, I'm just rocking it back and forth like this until it drops away from, the header drops out of the cylinder head and the mounting points clear the engine case. And at this point, now we can access the center hub nut, change out the rear tire. So a lot of people always ask, why is it so hard to change a scooter tires? Well, you always got a muffler, a swing arm, you got brake components in the way, and located under here is how you'd also access the rear drum brakes on any of these 125 or 150cc scooters. So hypothetically, you've changed your tire, it's time to put the muffler back on. And you have your 4 pieces of hardware that hold the muffler to the engine. First of all, these 2 6mm bolts, one's shorter. The short one always goes on the top. And don't get them wrong, because the muffler won't be all the way seated. If you put the long one on the top, it won't bottom out. Also included, there's a very thick washer, and there's also a locking washer under there. Typically, they're still in good condition. You can look in the description of this video for the 2 specific part numbers for those bolts, along with these copper-coated 7mm header flange bolts. So one last thing you may consider changing is the exhaust gasket. All it is a copper washer, and copper being a softer metal than steel, just by the compression of this is what makes a gas-tight seal. This part, you can see it has little ears on it, 4 of them specifically. And the way you remove it from the cylinder head is just take a pick or a small flat-bladed screwdriver and just pry it out of the cylinder head. And you're going to need to look under there. I'm not going to show it in this video on how to do it. And then you want to take a socket that's similar diameter, a little bit larger than this, and then tap the new washer back in place without distorting it too much. Typically during a routine tire change, you don't need to change this gasket. But if you're having problems with exhaust leak or a noisy exhaust, you may consider changing that. Or if your scooter's, the exhaust has been off half dozen times, it'd certainly be a wise idea to change it out. So hypothetically, we changed our tire and have that center nut all torqued with that cotter pin. Now it's time to get the muffler in place. One thing to keep in mind, if you're replacing the muffler, oftentimes the distance between this header and these mounting points may not be perfect, especially if you're putting an aftermarket pipe such as a Cedo Plus performance pipe. You need to make adjustments to this header, and the way you do that is you clamp this down in a vise and make minor adjustments to it. It's a little bit tricky, but that's just part of what happens when you're going to change out exhaust. Sometimes they're not a perfect fit. So just a little note right there. So in order to get the muffler in, I have the flange for the exhaust down, and get right under there, and you can see it doesn't quite want to line up. Just like when we put it in there, see how I'm rocking it? Rock it back and forth, and eyeball your holes, get it all up in, into this well. It's very easy to have it misplaced and tighten. I can get the flange on there and it will tighten down. With the exhaust leak, it will kind of make a little pop, pop, pop noise. It will melt your shrouds. But you kind of feel when the spigot goes up into the well of the cylinder head. And when you're at that point, you can see the screw holes are approximately centered. I'm going to take my short screw, and all I'm going to do at this point is just get it started. And at this point, it's just hanging right here. Go ahead and line up your exhaust flange over the pair of studs. Someday maybe I'll do a video on how to replace the studs. That's a whole pretty difficult task on its own. So get that up into place, and you can just, by hand, you can go up in there and get them started. Alternatively, you can put it in the socket, kind of feel your way around, get them started. And of course, with that snap-on swivel, it makes the job all that much easier. So at this point, I'm kind of just taking some weight off this muffler right now, and just hand tightening these pair. Because if you put any stress on this header, you're going to end up with a cracked header. Very common for scooter mufflers to fail because they're exposed to a lot of vibration from the road, unlike a motorcycle where the muffler's unsprung weight off the frame of the motorcycle. Scooters, unfortunately, the muffler is sprung weight, and it's off the engine and suspension members of the rear of the scooter, most scooters. So at this point, I'm just gonna give those both a little snug. So at this point, I typically like to hold a little pressure on the muffler, kind of take the weight off this header, and we can go between the pair of exhaust header flange nuts right here, and just evenly torque them, going back and forth between the two. And if you want to get a torque wrench up in there, it's about, I think they're about 11 foot-pounds. I'm just using a 1/4 inch ratchet, which just happens to give just the right amount of torque to tighten these appropriately. And then you have these pair. You can go between the two, tighten them to about 16 foot-pounds. And now you've successfully installed your muffler. Hopefully you start the engine. You don't hear any extra little pop, pop, pop noise from this header, which kind of indicates that your the exhaust spigot isn't lined up with the cylinder head. So that pretty much covers all my little tips on successfully removing 4 fasteners to remove exhaust successfully. Sometimes it's harder to be done than said. So thanks again for watching. This is Robot here from Vespa Motorsport and ScooterWest.com. First time you come across this channel, consider subscribing. I have over 600 videos all about Vespas, service, accessories, and a couple ride videos over all the years. Thanks again for watching. Robot here.